Hi everybody, I'm Jim Shore. Today we're in one of my workshops, and I want to show you a little project that I do from time to time. Getting close to Christmas, so I'm going to make something that's just a little small gift you add to your other gifts as a handmade piece. Sometimes those items are more cherished than things that you buy at the store that might be much more expensive. My daughter likes to cook, so she likes wooden spoons, and she wants one, and she wants me to make one. So today is spoon making day. Now, let me say first off, the shop is a mess. I'm sorry. I'll clean it up after New Year's, I promise. That'll be maybe one of my New Year's resolutions. But in the meantime, this is a finished one that I did yesterday, and I put a little engraving on the back that says to Wendy from Dad. And this is an inlay right here of a wood called Purple Heart. It's an exotic wood. But it's got a nice color. The spoon itself is made out of this happens to be bird's eye maple. If you make something that you use in your cooking, use a wood like maple. It's very hard. Got a very nice grain, and it's compatible with food. A lot of your cutting boards and so forth are made out of maple. It's the best stuff. If you don't have a piece of it laying around, which I don't expect you to, you can go to your any of the wood shops, like Woodcrafters and places like that, and that sell, that kind of stuff, and you can buy small blanks of that and a lot of different other kind of woods. What I made it out of, happens to be a piece of maple flooring. As you can see, it's made to be used as a floor, and I'm using it because I just happen to have it laying around, but it is maple, so it's a great material. I've skipped one step here showing you, and that is actually making the working part of the spoon. That's how you start, by making that shape right there. And the way that's done is you can do it a lot of different ways. Now, I used to make spoons with nothing more than just a small chisel and a pocket knife and some sandpaper. The easier way is to use what's called a gouge, similar to a chisel, only it's got a curved shape, and you can take the material out like that, and it's a lot easier to get that kind of contour. Working this way with the grain, and then working this way with the grain, and then you can work side grain like that, and then you finish it up with different grits of sandpaper until you get it like this. This is as smooth as can be. This part of the spoon right now is finished, okay? Now, I've taken a pencil and just drew on basically what I want my spoon to look like, and I'm going to do some inlays on this at some point. And this is a regular inlay process where you actually cut away the wood and you shape a piece of wood to fit in there, and then you put it in and shape it down. That's a little bit complex, I guess, for people who don't do it on a regular basis or haven't done it. So I'm going to show you a way of doing inlays that are quick and easy and extremely effective, and it allows you, with this process I'm going to show you, to do inlays that are very complex and detailed that would be very difficult to do if you inlaid wood. Okay, so now, that having been said, first thing we do is we will cut out the piece on the bandsaw here. This is a little bit noisy, and it takes a little while, so we'll get started, and then we can shut the camera off, and we'll jump over to the next step after we do this. So I'm going to get started here. Just follow a little bit on the outside of the line to give me a little bit of extra meat to work with. If you don't have a bandsaw like this, you can use a coping saw, or even a handsaw with chisels, but bandsaw makes it that's the way we get started. I'll go all the way around here, and when we come back, I'll have these things all cut out, and then I'll show you how I'll start the shaping. Okay, now, what I've done with the bandsaw, as you can see, I've cut these pieces out to the rough shape of, you know, what my finished spoon profile is going to be roughly. Then I've started doing something, and oh, by the way, don't ever do any of this stuff without wearing these. Now, the bandsaw is pretty tame, but some of the equipment, my sander, my routers, my grinders, table saw, so forth, there's pieces that are flying around, and you get hit in the wrong spot with one of them, and it'll ruin your day. So make sure that you never work on these things in the workshop without these, first and foremost, okay? Now, what I've started doing is just taking off some of the material, and if you can see, I'm just sort of faceting that just to get rid of some of the material. And I've done that very carefully on the bandsaw, but you could use a file to do it if you don't have a bandsaw. And then I've made just some line drawings on there as to how I want to contour the handle, and I'll start doing that once again on the bandsaw very carefully. And so always pay attention to where your outside is relative to the inside of your spoon, because you want the end of that spoon thickness to end up being somewhere around 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch thick. So I'm going to start contouring the hand. It's going to take a minute. Okay, now, as you can see right now, I've got something that looks pretty close to a spoon itself, rough as it is. If I were out in the woods, I'd love to have something like this to stir the beans with. But we're going to shape this up now with using my belt sander. But once again, you can take your time and use a file. The best file to use is a file called a 4-in-hand. It's like this. One side's rounded with a rasp and then a coarse file. The other side is flat with a rasp and a coarse file. You can do all of your shaping with this in pretty short order, and then follow it up with sandpaper. But you can use the coarse side to really remove a lot of material in a hurry, and then come back with the finer side and almost get it to a finished surface. Follow that up with sandpaper and it's done. So I'll cut out this other spoon that I've got while we take a little break, and then the next thing we'll do, we'll go over to the sander and we'll start shaping this thing up. Then we'll do the inlay and it'll be finished. See you then. Okay, now as you can see, I've taken both of these, sort of hogged out a lot of material. Really the reason I do that, because I'm going to use this sander here, and I don't want to waste time sanding a lot of stuff that I can just whack off, okay? With you, if you don't have this kind of stuff, you can do it easily with a hand coping saw and a file or a rasp and sandpaper. I've got the equipment though, and if you've got the equipment, it goes pretty simple. Now, this is a medium blade or grit. It's not very aggressive. Normally I would start out with a fairly aggressive thing because I sort of know what I'm doing, but this won't eat it up quite as fast, and you can kind of take your time, and you've really got to pay attention to what you're doing, because once you take the material off, you can't get it back on. So you have to be very careful, always be conscious of the thickness that you're creating down here, and then the rest of it's kind of done by feel. You have to just sort of feel kind of where you're at with it and checking it periodically. So I'm going to get started and start roughing some of this stuff out, and you'll see I'll just do it like this and like this while the thing's going, and it'll gradually shape it. I'll check it constantly to make sure my thickness is good and that the shape is progressing the way I want to. Take it slowly and deliberately so that you don't mess up, because you've got a good start, okay? All right, let me turn this thing on. I'll show you how to get started. Okay, so we just continue on in that vein, just taking a little bit, gradually smoothing it more and more. When you get it down to this point right here where you have all these facets in it, some people like that. It gives it kind of a rustic look, and you can leave it at that. Or you can take it and make it as smooth as the inside of this is by just working it down with a series of different grits of sandpaper. And like I say, the rest of this can be taken off with your file, or you can continue on, with something like this. But a few more minutes on this, and you can see how fast it goes. A few more minutes on this, and I'll have both of these spoons ready to do the finishing on. And I'll show you how to put the inlay. I'm going to put a heart on one of them, and maybe, I don't know, some little rosemary or something on the other, and you'll see how easy that goes. So, see you in a minute. Okay, now I finished the initial rough sanding on the machine, or you with your file and so forth. And now it'll look just about like this. I've got them, as you can see, pretty close to being a finished spoon. Once again, let me show you the finished one, see? But it's all just nice and smoothed out from this. This is minutes away from looking like this. And what I do now is take, hand sandpaper. Now this is fairly aggressive. This is 100 grit. And you just start like that. And as you can see, that part right there, if you can see that, see how nice and smooth that is? That's actually a finished surface, but I'll go over it with, maybe a 220 or a 300 grit after this to really get it smoothed in. But you go all over your spoon like this, and as you're doing it, feel for high spots, at which point you would take your file or something, or some additional sanding, and get that all smoothed out so that everything's all nice and smooth and consistent, and so that it's nice and smooth like that one is in there. And then it will be ready to do the inlay, which is the next step. But we're almost done, see? And that was quick and painless, and it's something that you can do just as a, additional gift for those in your family that love to cook, he or she. And so anyway, the next step is, after I get finished sanding these all up and you get finished sanding all of yours up, we'll spend just a little bit of time and I'll show you how to put a little decorative inlay right there that'll make it different, special, unique, and one of a kind. So when we come back, that's what we'll do. Okay, we're going to wrap up this spoon project. I want to talk a little bit about forming probably the hardest part of it, and that is scooping out the spoon. I talked about it a little bit previously, and I mentioned gouges. These are some brand new gouges that I just bought, and I've sharpened them to a razor scary sharpness. Now, if you're using this, and if you haven't done this before, I want you to be extremely careful, because these things will cut you, and I've got the scars to prove it. You can clamp your piece of wood to a table if you don't have a vise, but it's got to be secure. And you always cut with the grain, meaning that on a spoon like this, you would start cutting with the grain this way a little bit, then you would start doing it this way. So you would get this way, then this way. And you can use I use what's called a maul, but you can use a mallet or something to help you along, or a little hammer if you got it. And if it gets too tough, that means you're taking too big a bite. Back off, take a little bit of bite, just a little bit at a time, and you'll get that spoon cut out. I've made a lot of gouges myself, actually. I've made them even out of old spoons. Cut spoon in two, sharpen it, away you go. But, or you can use, what I use in the shop is a ball router, and that's something that or a burr. You may have access to something like that, but if you don't, there's, like I said, there's a number of different ways to get that. But that's the most important part of the spoon, starting with that right there, starting there. As soon as you get that finished, then you can take your bandsaw, your coping saw, if you're doing it by hand, and contour your spoon, cutting away as much material as you can, and then finish it up with, this is the handiest file in the workshop. It's called a 4-in-hand, and if you haven't got one, you need to get one, because it's got a flat rasp and a convex rasp, and then it's got on the other side flat mill file, rounded mill file. So you can do all kinds of stuff. It's not for finish work, but it'll take the material down to where you can start finishing it with sandpaper and that kind of stuff. So once we've got our spoon exactly the shape we want it, here I'll show you one of the finished ones. Now these are two that I've finished already. You can stop with just the spoon shape if you like, that's fine. Or you can embellish them with a little bit of decoration. Now, as you can see, I've got two little decorative aspects here. And those are inlays. But they're not inlays in the traditional sense of making a pocket and then cutting a piece of fine, fine wood or marquetry or whatever you want to call it, and then inlaying that. That's pretty difficult, and it takes a lot of precision, a lot of care, and a lot of experience. This, anybody can do it this way. It's kind of sort of a faux inlay, and I'll show you how to do that. And you can get as elaborate as you want. If you know my artwork, I get carried away with the elaborate. And in this, I thought this is a simple design. I would put a simple decoration on it, as you can see. So the third spoon is one I'm going to show you. It'll go along with this set. So I've drawn on it a design, and I'm going to cut that out with a Dremel. You can pick these things up at the craft store. Just about everybody's got one. It's got a variety of bits and so forth. Or you can use an X-Acto knife. You can use a drill if you're very careful. It doesn't have to be a design like this. It can be much more elaborate, or it can be a lot simpler. You can do just a series of dots or a couple of stripes. Just something to add a little bit of flair to the project. Okay, now I've done this very thing on, I've done it on knife handles, I've done it on gun stocks, I've done it on decorative plates, wooden plates, covered boxes. I've done a lot, and it's so very simple. And the material that I'm going to use, and I'll show you this as we go on, I'll mention it now, is this is epoxy putty. This particular one is made by JB Weld. They do a great job, and you can get them in. This comes in a couple of different colors. I think blue and white, or this comes out almost like a dark charcoal gray. But you can also use epoxies. Here's a couple of my favorites. These are 5-minute epoxies. You can get them at the hardware store, the home center, what have you, and you can tint this. Now you can tint it with powdered pigment that you can get at the craft store in almost any color you can think of. This happens to be red. And this is here's an example of some epoxy that I did up with a little bit of the red in there. I lightly tinted it. You can get darker and darker with it. And it can be black, blue, yellow, any number of colors that are available. Or you can use chalk dust. You can use finely ground espresso coffee. So you can get creative with this stuff and come up with all sorts of different combinations to color your inlays, and you can color different parts of it. On this one I could do that in red, that in green, and so forth. So just get creative, put some thought to it and get creative. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut pockets following my design, which I will fill with this stuff. And then we'll let it harden, and we'll have a reveal, and you'll be amazed at how this thing works. Now, the Dremel is kind of noisy, so I'm going to start out, and I will then we'll stop it for a while until I finish the design, which only takes a few minutes. And I'm going to start out. Normally, I start out with a fine tip and do all the fine aspects first, but on this case, I'm going to do a little different. I'm going to start out with with a ball. As you can see, this is a ball end, and you know there's all kinds of ends that go on these Dremels. Do all kinds of stuff with them. I use it all the time. And the reason I got the ball, you can see the ball. See, that'll cut a little ball shape. I'm going to do that with these what will become petals around like this. I'll start this and that with this, and then I'll finish it up with a little bit finer tips, and you'll see. So here we go. Like I said, it's a little bit noisy. I'll start, then I'll show you what it looks like after I finish, which just takes a few more minutes. I just don't want you to have to suffer through the noise, okay? Okay, I'm stopping midway here because I want to show you. That's what it looks like after I've used the ball and just made the dots around there, so it couldn't be simpler, okay? Now, we'll carry on, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm finished. Okay, I've finished the dremeling, and as you can see, the pockets are there, like that. And if you're really good at this and take your time, you can put a little message on the back of the gift. It's for my daughter Wendy, so that's what I'm doing for that. Okay, now the way we get this inlay done, I showed you this JB Weld. Here's what it looks like. I'll cut off just a little bit of it with my knife, like so. And as you can see, there's two parts to it. So what you do, you knead that into a consistent color. That puts the two parts of the epoxy together, and they will start hardening almost immediately. What you want it to be real consistent. It'll turn into almost black, but not kind of a slate gray like that. Then what you want to do is simply start pushing it into your design like this. Use a lot of pressure so that it gets all down into the bottom of your groove, your dots, your design, whatever you did. Like so. Now, we'll wait for just a few minutes for this to harden, and it hardens pretty quick. And then when we come back, I'll show you the reveal on this, and you'll be amazed. Okay, after a few minutes, my epoxy putty has hardened, and I'm starting to cut it away with the flat part of my mill file. Okay, now I'll clean that up with a little bit of this very fine sandpaper. And here's what we got. So now the next step is to put a little bit of a coat of mineral oil. Only mineral oil. Don't use any kind of oil that comes from a bean or a grain. Mineral oil is what you should treat your cutting boards and your wooden implements with, and it'll put a little bit of a honey color to it and make it really pretty, but it sustains it in a way that the other oils don't. You don't want to have to coat it with anything. It's natural wood, oil finish, and it'll be just like this. So that's what the set will look like. It'll be pretty. So there you go. Hope that gives you an idea of a little simple project you can do. Now, if you're uncomfortable, I might add, with making this this part of it here, your first one you can make it flat, like a spatula, and that works too. So it'll be a great little gift, very simple, and people will appreciate the fact that you took time to make something by hand for them, and it means generally a lot more than anything you can buy. So, okay, in the meantime, Merry Christmas.